All right, let's get into the tech topics of the day. The first thing I want to talk about is Apple giving iPhone users, Apple users, more control over how their Siri interactions are collected and used, and whether they're collected and how they're used. Because I don't know if you caught this recently, but Apple was sort of in some hot water because they've positioned themselves to be known as the tech company that cares about people's privacy. And then all of a sudden, a report came out that said Apple is collecting Siri data from people and using it, hiring contractors. They were doing this to grade, is what they call it, the Siri interactions in order to improve the overall Siri experience. The problem is this was happening without people really knowing about it. And I think The Verge has done a good job of covering terms of service lately for different phones and devices and kind of showing how you have to accept these huge long documents, which nobody ever really reads, but kind of sign away several, different kinds of your rights just to use a product, whether it's an iPhone or Android services or whatever. So anyways, recently, Apple was collecting a lot of this Siri data from people without them really knowing about it. You can sign one of these things by hitting that accept button when you sign up, when you get your new iPhone and you just want to get it set up and you're kind of rushing through everything. You hit accept on this big, long, digital document, and you might be signing away some rights that you didn't really realize. And it's not really fair on the one hand to ask consumers to read that whole thing. I don't know what a better solution is. And this is kind of a hard thing. I felt personally kind of blindsided by Apple when I read about this, when I heard about it, because you got the HomePod. I got the HomePod in the house. I use Siri all the time for like creating reminders, asking about the weather and whatever. And the reason that I was using those things and not something that a lot of people would say is smarter, like Alexa or Google Assistant, is because I did value my privacy and my family's privacy. And so, yeah, I think a lot of people rightly felt a little bit betrayed by Apple hearing about this Siri data collection. So it was wrong of Apple to go about this the way that they did. And I think it also was kind of a bad look in that they wanted to use all this data without kind of making it more clear that they were. And the reason it was sort of a bad look is because it kind of felt like they were going to take advantage of all the data that they could without asking, or being more explicit about how they were going to collect and use it because they needed to catch up to Alexa or Google or whatever. You know what I mean? It almost felt like that or looked like that. And that's not the right way to do it. So it was bad that it happened, but it was kind of good in one sense because now Apple, having done the wrong thing to begin with, is now correcting that, and they're doing this. They're fixing this situation. They're trying to remedy it with iOS 13.2, I believe is the right update. And what they're doing is giving us control now of whether or not our data is collected. Well, I guess if you use Siri, your data is collected and sent to, Apple's data centers for processing. But whether or not that's retained and stored and then used for grading, whether by contractors or Apple employees, that is now up to you. So Apple is actually making a pretty big deal about this with iOS 13.2, whether you set up a new device with your iPhone, whether it's an iPhone or an iPad. With 13.2, you're going to see as part of that setup process, the option. They've baked it into the setup to either allow or disallow this kind of Siri and transcription service collecting and analyzation. It's up to you now. And it's baked into the setup, which is pretty cool. I respect that. Now, if you're not setting up a new device, but you download 13.2 and you want to turn all this stuff off anyways, then you want to go into your settings, privacy, and then analytics and improvements. It's not actually under the Siri settings, which is kind of weird. It makes sense where it is, but it may not be where you're looking for. So bookmark this part of the podcast, and you'll want to go to settings, privacy, analytics, and improvements. And once you're there, you're looking for the section that says improve Siri and dictation. And there's some little text underneath that says, help improve Siri and dictation by allowing Apple to store and review audio of your Siri and dictation interactions. You're going to want to flip that off, I think. For me, I'm flipping that off. Not like that, though. And the cool thing is, once you have this set up the way that you want, it's then also going to apply to like your Apple Watch or your HomePod. So this is like the one place to kind of take care of how Siri and your interactions with it are handled. Now, if you choose to opt in, then your interactions with Siri may go to Apple. for them to check out and try to improve the service. And that's the key word, may. It's kind of nebulous because maybe it'll happen all the time with all of your interactions, although probably not. I think John Gruber kind of pointed out that it would make more sense if when something went wrong, for then that to be flagged to go to Apple for further analysis to try to improve it. And this is the double-edged sword, right, with this kind of a service, because as an Apple user, you do want it to improve, but also as an Apple user, you don't want to be the guinea pig that's used, and your interactions, you don't want those to be the thing that helps it improve in a way. You know what I mean? The other thing to know, though, is that if you opt into sending your stuff to help Siri improve, which thanks if you do it, and then I don't have to, but your contacts, the name of your contacts might get sent over, as well as location data. So a lot of stuff actually ends up getting shared. Interestingly, that information then ends up getting kept for 6 months, and it's paired with a random identifier, supposedly, although I've read a lot of articles about how anonymized data isn't really all that anonymous in the age of AI, but whatever. And then after that, it may still get kept for up to 2 years without any identification attached to it at all. So it could have quite a long lifespan. And it should be noted, Google now will give you a lot more control over your data that you give to Google. And I think they said something about like it'll be kept for 3 months or whatever. And it's very possible they don't even need that 3 months to hang on to your data to enable all the Google services, but whatever. So I guess big picture, it's good that we're getting some data control in this day and age. In the even bigger picture, though, I would really prefer to get paid for my data. Did you know that your data, I read this, so not 100% sure how accurate, but people are saying your data is worth more than oil right now. And we're just giving it away for free, basically. Now, while we're talking about this, what about all the data that's already been collected if you're an Apple user? What about that? Well, that's something that you have a little bit of control over too with 13.2. So, and if you go in now, that will be something that you can find how to delete this in the Siri settings. So you go settings, Siri and search, Siri history, and tap delete Siri and dictation history. After that, you're done. So if you opt out and if you go in and delete your Siri history, should be like a clean start for you in the Apple ecosystem moving forward. And just like I said at the beginning, the only way to completely ensure that nothing of yours ever makes it to Siri's backend computers and data center is just to not use it at all. But that's not actually very feasible. Not only would it be very inconvenient to not be able to use Siri, but even things like Siri shortcuts, which I use all the time, run through Siri. So, I mean, who's going to do that? I don't know. I'm not going to do that. But I will turn things off and delete the history.